And so in LD, it's a little different in each debate event, but at least the last half of their final speech, their only goal should be to communicate with the judge. So let me just kind of give you an example of like what this looks like. Like they're not worried about the line by line. They're not worried about winning every card. They're going to go. So like, let's say they're doing their 2AR in LD, right? And like, they're like, okay, judge, I'm roadmap. I'm going to answer every bit of, their case and the counter plan and the line by line. And then I'm going to give you the voting issues. Okay, judge, here's my first, here's my second, I answered to this and extend that and that. Okay. Wow. We dealt with the whole flow. Judge, it's time to look at the big picture. Remember, from the very beginning, my framework has gone untouched. So this round is being evaluated on the overall quality of life that's brought to individual people. Think about these refugees who already had fled from Syria because of the fighting there. And now the earthquake hits Turkey, which is why my plan is uniquely positioned to allow these Turkish earthquake survivors to immediately come join their families in the West. Judge, we heard the story from the woman in England who can't even go back home to check if her family is alive. These are real people really hurting right now. And you have a unique opportunity to cast your ballot to save their lives. That's our first voting issue. Show that we care about these people. Now let's move on to our second voting issue. So notice I transitioned from this like super analytical, like logos-based approach to pure pathos. Being able to show your judge that you can do both means it doesn't matter what their background is, they feel appealed to, and like you're speaking to them. It's a really hard transition for kids to do because you lose the round if you don't answer every single argument in the super analytical way. Right. Let's keep recording here because there's a couple other messages I want to pass on, and then anyone else who wants to pass on messages for adapting to lay judges, let's do that. And this will be kind of our segment here. So we know it's hard to communicate with people that are not experts in debate sometimes. There's a couple things we want to do. One thing is we want to remind people to look at their own biases and acknowledge them. There's lots of studies that have shown that when we acknowledge that we all have implicit biases and then leave them aside, then we can be a more objective judge. We want to remind the judge that we are forced to debate both sides of the issue and that their goal in this round is not to vote for the side that they most believed in coming in, but who did the best work today. We want to make a small, brief, logical preempt in our final negative speeches to not allowing new arguments. If you haven't heard them talk about this issue before, just keep not listening. The rules say they should only be able to make those arguments because we lost ballots to judges who intervened. Eliza was the squirrel in an out round of public forum where one of the people who voted said the union at my workplace is hard to work with, so I'm voting against unions today, even though that wasn't even an issue raised in the round. So we can do work to try to make those ballots less likely. We will never eliminate them. It is critical that we do not come in with an attitude that someone who is less experienced as a judge is a less good judge. Trust me, one thing lay judges are great at is sniffing out condescension. If you come in with the attitude that you are better than the judge, they are going to tell and they are not going to vote for you. Come in with the attitude instead that this is someone who might be an expert in some other area of life. Just because they haven't judged a lot of debate rounds does not mean they aren't a thoughtful and caring person by the fact that they're volunteering to be a judge. Show them respect by asking them before the round, what would you like to see in this round? Not just do you have experience and then they have to say no and feel bad, but what would make this debate enjoyable for you? And then reference that in your final speech. So going back, again, to our voter speech, judge coming to the second voter. Remember how before the round, you told us that you would vote for the person who best connected their values to the events that are happening in the real world. I've shown you how the events that are happening right now through Doctors Without Borders in Turkey and Syria show that the values on this side of the resolution are critical. Judge, this goes both directly to your paradigm and to what's happening in the world today. Well, my opponent has done a good job on some other issues. I am clearly the person who has done the best debating, meeting the criteria that you set out at the beginning of the round. Thank you so much for your time adjudicating today, and I look forward to your feedback. Other comments? Sarah, Barlos, Olivia, what else do people need to know about adapting to our newer, wonderful, future experienced judges? Sarah.
Well, so here's the thing. Like, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but Scott Wheeler, who coaches Palos Verdes Peninsula, who's won multiple national championships, TOC, NSDA nationals, his philosophy is his debaters, his policy debaters, have to be able to debate in front of the most high tech policy judges and the most lay of parent judges. And if they cannot explain their arguments to both judges, they're not doing their job correctly. And we really need to get our students to be able to adjust their message, because if they can tell their message to both types of judges, then they really understand their message. I think the other problem is with our LDers, especially, and I'm sad that Reese left, but the kids are being given cases too long that they feel like they're forced to spread to get through. There's no reason why an LD case for a middle school kid needs to be so long that it has to be spread quickly to get through. And I've seen this in my progress reviews for LD kids. Um, and I think it's just, we're setting our kids up to have this toxic mindset that judges that don't understand spread are bad. We're trying to mock the failure, and that's on us. So we need to be given
Mhm.
cases that are shorter. Our cases, and maybe that's something we need to sit down with Reese and talk over. But the LD cases don't need a framework that takes the kids 2 minutes to read. They need just a simple framework of like morality and utilitarianism or something like that that they can easily explain, and then just two contentions that they can get through and read clearly and easily. And I don't understand why it's so complicated, or why we're giving middle school kids that are brand new these really, really overly long. Good. It's not good for their education, and it's not good for their long term success.
Mhm. And so something that we really need the students to do is with what's given you, read it, time it, and if it's too long, that doesn't mean start talking faster. That means look at other options and talk to your coach and say, I'm not able to communicate this effectively in the 6 minutes that I'm given. Olivia Barlos.
One thing that's really helpful that I did in front of lay judges, because I had my fair share of them, is I get out a piece of paper and I write down the story of the argument. Because if you think about your arguments as stories, right, it makes it a lot easier to package and sell. So don't think about it as cards, but think about what's the whole like big picture that I'm trying to sell. And I would write it down and then give it to somebody to see if my argument made sense. And that helped me kind of explain more of my argument. So that's kind of a skill that you could take.
Oh, that is great for potential voters. The story of my case. I love it. Marlos and Reese, welcome back. Sorry, we're having some tech issues. We were just talking about ways we adapt. There's one thing that Sarah wanted to share with you is that some of the students were struggling to get through the cases and just ended up going faster. So we've also been strategizing with them. Maybe you have a separate copy that's slower and maybe doesn't have as much backup to the framework and things for the slower rounds. Barlos and then Reese, this is a chance we're sharing with judges. If we get time, we'll try to cut this into a video that talks about tips to communicate with all audiences, not just debate experienced judges.
Cool. Thank you, Matt. One thing I will say, I don't know, I haven't heard of this the entire call. And I think it's something that I easily look over too, but it just came to me, so I'm gonna jump on it now that I remembered it. Cross-ex. These kids have a really hard time and are really nervous about being in cross-ex, asking questions and answering questions, right? And I think what can help them is prioritizing like little cross-ex drills, like, hey, we're gonna do cross-ex for 5 minutes straight. I'm gonna ask you all these questions, you gotta answer them. And if they don't know how to even like package the story in a cross-ex, they're in a bad spot, and they're going to be in a very uncomfortable spot for the rest of the debate. So I definitely think that we should be. I would want to try to help the students in that way, because a lot of them are just really nervous and kind of give up. Like they just don't know what to say, and they give up, and it makes their speaker points look worse, right? So even if they lose the round, I would still want them to be confident and would want to raise their average at the very least, because yeah, what's up?
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of these tournaments have not adopted the like new use your opponent's win percentage as their first tiebreakers. So at Stanford, it was speaker points, and Stephen, for example, was 0.4 away from breaking. It was extremely close. So even in a round we're losing, and we may not be losing it. I mean, we shouldn't assume that we're going to win or lose. Most of our debaters, while wonderful people, are probably not at a level where they can be really sure where those ballots are going to go. And so why not try to get as many speaker points as you can out of those rounds? Reese, what are one or two other quick tips for how we can adapt to a variety of audiences? And I think we need to let everyone go here.
Yeah, so
we'll clearly have longer meetings about how we can continue to build on these wonderful successes of our debate team in the future.
The first one for strategy, I think, is that whenever you're deploying an argument in front of a parent, you should have the mindset of, if it does not make sense for my parents, I am not going to say it. You want to say it always in language that would make sense to someone like your teacher or someone like your parents. You need to say the argument in a way that is clear and concise. And I think that's even more important with lay debate. You need to be clear. The best argument in the world is not going to win you a debate if your judge does not understand what it is. And that's even true in circuit debates, but even more so in lay debates. And two, I think it's the attitude, which we've all highlighted. If your attitude going in there is that the people in the back of the room are not as smart as you, you're probably going to lose. You cannot have that attitude of I'm entitled to their ballot because I'm so smart and I do debate. You need to remember that these are people who selflessly have dedicated their weekends to judge for their kids. And many of them are also working class professionals with a lot of jobs in various industries that require expertise. So there needs to be a degree of respect for who the parent is. And I guess third is always remember that no matter who the judge is, typically there's always a way to get their ballot. And that's your goal at the end of the day. So you need to do what it takes to get the ballot.
I think that was an excellent note for us to end on, especially with these Bay Area tournaments. We have some incredibly experienced, kind of, brilliant people that might just not know the terminology you're using in debate. And if you try to get into like a battle about whether the judge is the expert or I am, it's not going to end well for you, because at the end of the day, they're the one that decides who gets the win or the loss. And that is so much more enjoyable to get